Divination, thank you for joining us in this live stream. Today we'll show you how to create an e-commerce mega menu with Divi in the theme builder. So if you haven't checked out Divi yet, make sure that you do. I've mentioned a link in the description below where you can go ahead and discover everything for yourself. So without any further ado, let's get to it. All right, so I want to say hi to everyone on YouTube and on Facebook. If you guys have any questions, make sure that you leave a comment, and I'll be checking on the comments quite frequently just to be able to answer you guys' questions. So let's get started with the tutorial and the preview of it. So what we'll create within this live stream tutorial is an e-commerce mega menu, which is completely customized using Divi. So all of the elements that you'll be able to see within this mega menu are made with Divi. So they're all Divi modules, Divi rows and sections, and they're placed inside the menu modules, so as drop downs. So for instance, over here, you can notice that I have 3 menu items, one being clothing, shoes, and accessories. Now, if I hover one of these items, a drop down appears, and these are all unique. So you can customize each one of the drop downs using the Divi built-in modules. And as soon as you unhover it, it goes away. So we'll achieve this using the Divi theme builder. And we also have a very nice alternative on smaller screen sizes. So on smaller screen sizes, we have a slightly less overwhelming design, if that makes sense. If I click on this hamburger icon over here, and if I toggle one of the options, all of the different product categories will show up, but we're hiding the, over here, if I hover this, we're hiding the 3rd and 4th columns, so the images, and also it doesn't become too overwhelming on mobile, and people can just search through product categories. So if I click this, the other one closes, and so on and so forth. So this is what we'll recreate within this live stream tutorial. I also want to mention that you will be able to download this entire global header. So it's a global header inside the Divi theme builder, and you'll be able to download it in the blog post, which is mentioned in the description below. So I would definitely recommend that you guys grab that blog post first. So go there, because we'll be going back to that blog post for the code, for instance, that we'll use to place all of the Divi built modules and elements inside the menu. So definitely keep that blog post close by, and over there you will also be able to follow everything step by step. All right, so let's get started with the recreation process. Now, over here I have a page that doesn't have the mega menu on it. So we just have the regular standard Divi header that's enabled on it, and we're going to replace this throughout the tutorial step by step by recreating the mega menu. And now the first part, before actually diving into Divi itself, you will need to create your menu, obviously, in the WordPress backend, and you will need to add some CSS classes to the menu items that you want to contain a drop down. So let me just go to Appearance Menus over here. And to be able to add CSS classes to menu items, you need to toggle these screen options at the top over here and make sure that the CSS classes option here is enabled, which it is in my case, because I'm working on this particular website. Now over here, if you haven't created a menu yet for your e-commerce website that you're working on, go ahead and do that. Add all of the pages, and then decide which menu items you want to add a drop down to. So for instance, I want to add a drop down to each one of these. And to be able to pull that off, I'll need to add 2 CSS classes to each one of the menu items. So the first one remains the same for each item, and it's first-level. So this is just a global CSS class that we'll use throughout the tutorial, but then for each different menu item, we'll also need to use consecutive CSS classes. So the second CSS class is a consecutive CSS class. So the first one is first-level-1, and then the second one is first-level-2, and the third first-level-3. And you can create as many drop downs as you will by following this method. So if you were to add another drop down to another menu item, you'd use a CSS class that says first-level-4. All right. So this is the first part of the tutorial. Without these CSS classes, we won't be able to place all of the dropdowns inside the proper menu items. So this is very important before you move on to the Divi part of the tutorial, and that will all happen within the Divi theme builder. So go ahead and go to Divi theme builder. All right, so over here in the Divi theme builder, you can notice I have a global header, which is the one that I've shown you guys in the first part of the tutorial. So this is the global header that I've built, but I've also created a separate template for the use case page over here that still has the standard navigation going on. So I'm going to recreate this within this new template, if that makes sense. So to do that, I'm going to click on Add Custom Header and Build Custom Header. When entering the template editor, you will get 3 options. You can start building from scratch, choose a pre-made layout, or clone an existing page. We're going to browse everything. We're going to create everything from scratch, so I'll choose the first option. But if you want to use the JSON instead, so the JSON file instead, which you're able to download by going to the blog post in the description below, you will choose the second option after uploading the JSON file. So let me just start building from scratch over here. So we already have a section over here, and this will be dedicated to, the header over here at the top. So before adding any elements, I'm going to open the section settings and make some changes here first. I'm going to remove all default top and bottom padding by adding 0 pixels to both options in the spacing settings. And I'm also going to hide this entire section on smaller screen sizes in the visibility settings over here. So phone and tablet are, disabled. And the reason why we're doing that is just to make sure that it doesn't become too overwhelming on mobile. So it's definitely something that you'll often see with e-commerce menus specifically. The menus and the elements are almost always completely different on desktop and on mobile, because you still want it. You still want that navigation experience to be easy, even though you might be missing out on some important copy or whatever. It still isn't as important as having a flawless navigation. So that's the reason why we're hiding the entire section. So the one that's dedicated to the top bar over here with the logo and the 3 text modules. Okay, so now that we have these section settings in place, we can add a row, and we're using a row with 4 columns. Now before adding any modules, I'm going to open the row settings, and over here in the sizing settings, I'm going to use custom gutter width. I'll put this to 1. I'm also going to equalize the column heights. I'm using a width of 95% and a max width of 100%. So this will just allow us to take almost the entire width of the section container. And then in the spacing settings, we're going to remove the default top and bottom padding that's assigned to the row by adding 0 pixels to both options. And now we can add modules, starting with an image module in column 1. And this image module will be dedicated to our logo. So let me just grab a logo. But so this will just be dedicated on desktop. On smaller screen sizes, we'll place the logo inside the menu module, which you'll be able to see later on. So, all right. You can also add some spacing settings, so you can style this however you want, obviously. And you won't be needing to modify the responsive values because this entire section is hidden on smaller screen sizes. So we're just modifying this as we go. And now we're going to add a text module in column 2. So we're using text modules to display all of these ordering benefits, I guess you can call them. And let me just grab the copy. So we're using a span for the first part of the copy. So I've toggled the text editor and we're using a different color for the first word over here. but you can modify this however you want. And then we'll go to the text settings, and we're going to use, so the font that we're using throughout this tutorial is called Oswald. We're using a medium font weight. We're enabling uppercase as well, a black text color, and 19 pixels for the text size. And then in the spacing settings, we're going to add some top and bottom margins. So that'll be 5% for both options. So just to create a little bit of space at the top and at the bottom. So once you've completed the first text module, you can clone it twice. I'm just going to clone it once, place it in the third column of the row, and then clone it again and place it in the last column of the row. So obviously you will need to change the copy for each one of these. And up next we have the second section, and this one's dedicated to the menu over here. So we'll add a menu module to this section, but before we do that, we'll need to modify some section settings. So I'll just use a regular section, and I'm going to remove all default top and bottom padding by adding 0 pixels to both options in the spacing settings. So that will just remove the space so we can control it a little bit better. And we'll add a new row with 1 column. So again, we'll want to, stretch this row, make it touch almost both sides of the section container. So to do that, we'll go to the sizing settings of the row itself. We'll enable use custom gutter width, place this to 1. We'll use 100% for the width and 100% for the max width. And we're also removing the default top and bottom padding by adding 0 pixels to both options over here. Now over here, you can notice that we have these kind of top and bottom borders. These have been applied to the row itself. So we're using 2 pixels for that, for the top in the border settings over here in the design tab. So 2 pixels, let me just add the color code, and 2 pixels here as well. So top and bottom both have 2 pixels, but on tablet and phone, we're removing this so we don't have them. So we don't have that top border on smaller screen sizes by bringing this to 0. So I've enabled the responsive option, and I brought this back to 0 on tablet and on phone. All right, now that we have the row container in place, I'll add a menu module. And over here, you will be able to select the menu that you've created in the first part of this tutorial. So these menu items have those 2 CSS classes assigned to them. Very important that you choose that menu, because that's where we'll place all of the drop downs later on the tutorial. Now on desktop, you can notice that we don't have a logo because we've placed it in the first section, but on smaller screen sizes, we've hidden the first section. So we still need our logo somewhere. And to add that logo on smaller screen sizes, we're just gonna enable the responsive option over here. We'll switch over to tablet, and we're gonna select that same logo, and this will automatically be inherited on phone as well. But on desktop, as you can see, we don't have that duplicate logo. And then we'll go to the elements. Since this is going to be in a mega menu for an e-commerce website, we'll need to enable definitely the shopping cart icon. You can also enable the search icon if you want, and we'll do that over here. And next, we'll style the items in the design tab. So the menu text settings. Let me just take Oswald. Again, we'll enable uppercase. We're using a black text color, 19 pixels for the text size. And in the drop-down menu settings, we're using a white line color. And then we have the icon settings, so we'll match this with that same orangey color that we've been using up until now. but you're free to modify anything however you want, style it however you want, use it for any kind of e-commerce website you're building. And you can find all of the steps written down in the blog post, which is mentioned in the description below. And you can also download the JSON file for free there and use it right away. And now that we have the general menu settings in place, we'll still need to add a CSS class, and this CSS class will just help us add the drop downs later on. So as mentioned at the beginning of this tutorial, we're adding Divi built drop downs. So we'll build the drop downs in Divi and then use some code to place them in each separate menu item. So to create your first drop down, you will need to add a new section. So one section below the section containing the menu equals a drop down. So here's where all the items will show up. So we'll add them, style them using Divi, and we'll start by opening the section settings over here. Go to the sizing settings, and it's very important that you make sure that the width and the max width are 100%, because later on using the code, we'll turn this drop down into an absolute positioned element. And for that, it's very important that you have these width values set up. So definitely make sure that you have these in place. So 100% for the width and the max width. And we're also removing the default top and bottom padding by adding 0 pixels to both options. Now this entire section will be dedicated to the first drop-down menu. So this will belong to the clothing menu item. So we've added first dash level dash 1 to this clothing menu item as a CSS class. And over here, we're using 2 CSS classes for the section that's dedicated to this menu item. The first one being drop-down dash menu, which will be the case for each one of the drop-downs. And then the second CSS class is called drop-down dash menu dash 1. So this number at the end will always be the same as the one for the menu item. So this is first dash level dash 1. And if you want this particular section to be part of the menu item as a drop-down, the number at the end must be the same. So very important to keep that consecutive order going on. All right. Now that we have the section settings in place, we can add a new row. So to create this drop down, we're using 4 columns. So 1, 2, 3, 4. Let me just grab it over here. 4. Before adding modules, we're going to open the sizing setting, the row settings, and add a white background first. And we're going to modify the sizing settings to allow the row to reach the sides of the section container. So to do that, we'll enable custom gutter width, put this to 1. We're also equalizing the column heights. We're using 100% for the width and 100% for the max width. So the row containers width is the same as the section containers width, if that makes sense. So the row is touching both sides of the section container, but we just have an extra container there being the section one. And you can make all modifications to the row sizing settings however you want. Not only the row sizing, everything you want to customize within this drop down menu section you can do. So you can customize it however you want, use any kind of style, place any kind of module. The one that we're creating over here is kind of a basic e-commerce mega menu structure, I would think. So we have some product categories here, and then we have some visuals, but you can place anything you want. If you want to keep learning how to create this particular mega menu, that'll be what we'll handle within the next part of this tutorial. But know that you can just skip the design part and just use the code, which we'll handle later on the tutorial, and create any kind of drop-down menu you want. So now that we have the sizing settings in place, we're going to remove all default top and bottom padding. So that will just make sure that over here, if I go back to the preview, you can notice that column 3 and 4 are touching the top and the bottom. And to make sure that we can do that, we'll need to remove the default top and bottom padding of the row itself. All right. And someone, I'm just keeping an eye on the comments. I see a lot of people joining in. I see Juan, Wakas, Kasim, and Karen has a question. Would that CSS code be wiped out on updates if you're not using a child theme? I don't see any reason why it would be wiped out, especially considering the fact that we're building this inside a template. So it's not just inside the Divi theme option, so nothing will override the templates that you build or the global header or footer templates. So I don't see that being a problem, but you can definitely add it to a child theme if you want to. The CSS code and the jQuery code will still apply to your menu, so you can place that wherever you want. All right, so now we've removed the top and bottom default padding. We can go to the border settings over here. If I hover this again, I like to show you guys a preview when I'm doing something so you guys know why I'm doing it. So at the bottom over here of the section of the drop down, you can notice a border. And we'll add that border over here to the row, 2 pixels. And that same orange color. And now that we have the default row settings in place, we're going to make some changes to the columns as well. So starting with column 1 and 2, we're going to use some spacing settings that are the same and main element CSS that are the same for both columns. So the first being the spacing settings. So let me just open the column settings over here. And I'm going to add 10% to the top and the bottom and 5% to the left and the right. So what I'll just do is I'll create the column 1 setting. So I'll put everything in place and then reuse this column. So we have some different values on smaller screen sizes. For that, I'm going to enable the responsive options. So the top and bottom padding on smaller screen sizes is 5%, just to make sure that we don't take too much place up with the padding. You can notice that here. Let me just go back. So if I click this, you can see that the top is 5%, bottom is also 5%. We don't need that to be 10%. And in the main elements of my column over here, I'm going to enable the responsive option and add a width of 50%. So we'll make sure that this is important. So this will just force the 2 columns to appear next to each other, as you can see over here. We're making sure that the width remains 50% on tablet and phone. So these are the settings that we need for both columns. Let me just remove the second column over here and clone the first one. So now both the first and the second column have the spacing settings and the 50% width CSS property. Onto the third column. So over here, we have a gradient, background, and a background image. So let me just add that really quick. We're in the, if I'm correct, we're in the third column over here. Yep. Let me just add a gradient background. The first color is transparent, still has some color to it, but it's 0.08% color to it, so 92% transparency. And this is the second color code. You can find all of these color codes and all of the settings in the blog post if you want to recreate this exact thing, or you can download the JSON file with this exact design that you can use right away. And I'm going to make sure that I place the gradient above the background image. Next, I'll upload a background image of my choice. Let me just grab this one over here. And I'm going to add some right margin, 10 pixels. So to create a little bit of space, as you can notice over here. So that white space between column 3 and 4 is the 10 pixels of right margin. And let me just hide this on smaller screen sizes as well. So phone and tablet need to be disabled because we don't want to create an overwhelming experience, as you can notice over here. And all right, so the settings for the fourth column are almost exactly the same. I'm going to remove the fourth column and clone the third one. I'm going to open these settings over here and I'm going to remove that right margin value because we don't need that. And this will need to be hidden on phone as well and on tablet. And let me just change the background image here too. So you can customize this however you want. All right, so now that we have the containers in place, it's modules, starting with a text module in column 1. So we'll use text modules to place our product categories inside the dropdown. So let me just add some copy, new in, it says you can add anything you want. Make sure that you add a proper link as well. Then I'm going to go to the text settings in the design tab, and I'm going to style this using the Divi options. So the built-in options, it allows you to visually see what you're building and, you know, later on place it within the menu item of your choice. So this menu over here that you can notice will still have some spacing later on when we add the code as well. I'm using a black text color, 22 pixels for desktop and 18 pixels for tablet and 16 pixels for phone. I'm adding some negative letter spacing, minus 0.6 pixels. I can also increase the line height to 2.4. So you can definitely notice how much freedom you have with the design that you create, and also all of the built-in responsive options with Divi help you customize it according to the different screen sizes. So you're really free to do anything you want and place any kind of module you want inside this drop-down section. Here, over here in the border settings, if I hover this and if I hover the item, you can see a border appear so people know they're hovering that particular item. To add that, we'll just add 2 pixels of bottom border and we'll enable the hover option on the border color. So not on the border width. The reason why we're not modifying the border width is because if I were to, you know, add 0 pixels of border width in a default state and add 2 pixels on hover, the container size would change, and you could, you know, you could see the container size change here. So this would become smaller on in a default state and larger on hover. So that's why we're just playing around with the border color itself. So we'll make the border color transparent and add the orange color on hover. So that will just, so technically in a default state, the border is there, but you just can't see it, if that makes sense. And you can use this, module for all the product categories that you want to show up inside your dropdown. Let me just remove the second column and clone the first column to create a duplicate with all the menu items. So of course you can modify all of the content along with the links to make any kind of product category show up or any kind of content you want. So this is the basic, you know, structure of the first and the second column where we have all of the different product categories. And up next we have some text modules in the third and fourth column. These are absolute positions. So let me add a new text module to the third column. And I'm just going to add some content. So this will probably also be a product category, or just a landing page, could be a landing page as well. Make sure that you add a link as well. In the text settings, I'm going to use Oswald again, a bold font weight. I'm going to enable uppercase. I'm using 3.4 VW for the text size, 1 EM for the line height, and I'm using a white text color. And I'm gonna absolute position this module in the bottom left corner by going to the Advanced tab, position put this to absolute. We'll select the bottom left corner, and we're, creating some offset using 2% for both options, just so the text has some space to breathe. And now I can clone this entire module. And place the duplicate in column. Right. In column 4. So as soon as I knew this, but I was just like a little confused right now. If you clone this, it will just appear on the same exact spot as the previous one. So now I have like 2 text modules above each other. Now it's one here and one here. So as soon as you'll clone it, it will look like it isn't cloned because the position is absolute. So don't be fooled. And of course, you will need to modify the copy and the link accordingly. Now, if you want to create a dropdown for the second and the third menu item that you've assigned a CSS class to, you can just clone this entire section. So let us just clone this twice. And you will need to change the CSS classes of the duplicate sections. So starting with the second one, as mentioned before, it's very important that you follow a consecutive order. The number at the end will be 2 for the second section and 3 for the third section, and so forth and so on. So just make sure that you follow that order, and you can create up to as many dropdowns as you want and place them inside the menu item of your choice. As soon as you've added the CSS classes to the menu items as well. So now that we have the general structure in place, it's time to add the code. And we'll add the code to a code module, which we'll place above the menu module in the second section. So let me just drag this, but you can place this code anywhere you want. You can place this in your child theme, as someone asked in the chat on YouTube. You can place this in the Divi theme options. I prefer to centrally keep the code inside my global header, just so I can share the file with you guys and you can immediately put it to practice. But you can place this anywhere you want, whatever your preferred method is. And you can find the code that we're using in the blog post, which is mentioned in the description below, as well as the JSON file, which you are able to upload. And that JSON file contains all of the code as well. So we'll add the CSS code first. Let me just grab the code. You can place these in separate modules if you want to, but I'm just going to place them together. So I've just added the CSS code, and I'm also going to add the Jquery code. So the Jquery code takes all of the different sections that are dedicated to a drop-down menu and places them as drop-downs inside the menu item, inside the menu module. And it also enables this different kind of approach on smaller screen sizes, where we have the toggling option, where as soon as you open a new drop-down, the previous one closes. So I've placed it in a code module together, the CSS code and the Jquery code. Now, as soon as you've finished the design of each one of the dropdowns, it's important that you enable the CSS class at the top. And this will just prevent a loading effect, so where you will be able to see the dropdowns when you load a page. And enabling the CSS class by removing these two characters at the top and the bottom will just place, this entire section, so all of these drop-down sections, to hidden right away, so they won't load, they won't flicker, they won't show up unless someone hovers the item right away. So make sure that you enable that CSS class. But beware, as soon as you have enabled the CSS class, let me just do that. As soon as you enable it, they will disappear from your global header, but you will still be able to access them through the layer view or the wireframe mode. So if I go to wireframe, you will still have all of the drop-down sections, and you can disable the CSS class if you're still modifying certain things inside your menu. So once that's done, you can just save the entire global header. Let me just save it and then take a quick look at the preview. So make sure that you save all Divi theme builder as well, theme builder changes as well. And so over here we have the use case page, which we've created the header for. Let me just refresh it. Here we have our new global header, and if I hover it, you can see the drop down menu, and you can use any kind of design style you want, modify this however you want. All right, so I'm just going to take one more last look at the comment section just to see if you guys have any more questions. Someone's asking, so Javier, I don't know if I'm pronouncing this correct, I'm just trying my hardest. The stream can be watched later, right? Yes, this will be available on the Elegant Themes YouTube channel or on Facebook, so you'll be able to rewatch this. I don't see any more questions. Well, all right, that was it. So that was it for this live stream. If you liked it, please give it a thumbs up, and we hope that you're enjoying this ongoing Divi Design Initiative where we try to put something extra into your design toolbox each and every week. Thank you for watching, and we look forward to seeing you in the next one. Bye.